Yeah, I will talk about a bit of technology enhanced learning and then especially serious games and gamification. I will give a few examples of these things also. Before I jump into that, I'll quickly introduce where I'm coming from. Basically, TH Köln is Germany's largest university of applied science, and we do a lot of research and education, of course, in various fields. One of these fields is basically represented by the Cologne Game Lab. At the Cologne Game Lab, which is an institute of TH Köln and belongs to the Faculty of Cultural Sciences, we actually do interdisciplinary education in terms of our digital games, bachelor and master programs, where we not only look at games from the cultural perspective, but also from technological design perspectives, art perspectives, and also especially in our research focus on different kinds of useful purposes that games can be used for, especially, of course, education, but also societal impact games, etc. Yeah, maybe slightly related also to VR for that, our Game Lab runs an incubator where we support students to start their own gaming companies. And for that, of course, they also need some skills and training into that direction. Now, a bit more of background to the topic of technology enhanced learning. A very quick historical perspective on innovation and technology and how it emerges. So what we can observe, basically, we are in a phase where technological advancements are increasingly fast. And if we zoom in a bit on where we currently are, we are basically at the step where artificial intelligence is jumping in our lives and where we, within a couple of years, maybe decades, can expect human level intelligence. Even though ChatGPT appears to be very intelligent, it's not yet there. So we don't have to be scared, but we have to observe these things. That's why also the vocational education and training is more and more important, because job profiles are under constant change. We need to educate people for this changing environment. And there are a few other factors that I want to just highlight. The world's population is, well, we surpassed the 8 billion and we are expected to surpass 10 billion even within the next couple of years or decades until we reach a kind of plateau. All of these people, of course, need jobs and they need to be educated for these. So bright futures for everyone in this field. Also, people live longer than ever before. So we don't only have more people, we have people who live longer, and in line with the dynamics of job profiles, this also needs, these people need to be educated longer. They need to be educated longer because during our lifetime, job profiles change. We need to be able to keep up with these changes constantly. So that's also a very important development that we have to see. While in the past it was quite common, you learn a job and then you work in that job basically all your life. Now we see more and more that people have to switch throughout their career completely what they are doing. And not only that, the world is also facing global challenges. A lot of these have to deal somehow with education, and also professional environments and jobs need to be able to take those challenges into account to make sure our businesses run in a sustainable manner and we keep up with the developments and challenges. So as a third aspect, we also need to improve education. Yeah, so we have to educate more people for longer lives in a better way. A lot of challenges to face that need to be addressed by education. The field of technology enhanced learning that I also represent here is organized to at least partially address these problems. And there is something like seamless learning that helps us to learn across different contexts. So what we learn in school, and then we continue in professional education. How do we support these lifelong learning transitions better? Computational thinking and educational robotics is a field where we look into what are the skills of the future. How do we educate? How do we make people aware of how to utilize and create technology in their life? Then multimodal and immersive learning experience. This is one of the fields very related to VR for that, of course. How do we make real life situations, create all these immersive environments using sensors, using modern technologies, and enable actual learning experience that involve the full body? So here we need to track people and find ways to support people along the way. Then we have the whole new field of artificial intelligence in education, where it's about like what can we expect from that field for our future? How do we embrace these technologies, but how do we also influence them? This is an important research field. And then what we focus on today, or what I will mainly focus on today, is the field of serious games and gamification as part of this whole technology enhanced learning field. How do we create interactive learning solutions that are playful, etc.? And how do we use that as a meaningful and personal tool for education to create these experiences? So far for that introduction. Let's look into then this field, this game-based learning, serious games, gamification field. What is actually a game when we look into it? Yeah, we can define a game. A game takes place in a specific space. It has defined mechanics that you utilize to play the game. It usually has a game goal. So what do we want to reach when playing that games? And reaching that goal follows specific rules. And usually a game should also expose us to some challenges that we need to overcome and solve in order to win the game or to master the game. And games in this general abstract meaning are not only digital, but if we transfer games into the digital space, then we would usually assume this space in which the game takes place is a so-called closed world. So everything happens within that game space. We utilize an interactive medium, so we have some kind of display of the game state and we interoperate with that. And a game is usually, or a digital game especially, is a self-sufficient medium. So we are in that game, we play that game, we don't need any other tools apart from the things the game offers itself to play that specific game. Now, games usually and generally are used for entertainment purposes. When we especially look into learning applications and games for learning, for instance, we also look at non-entertainment games. That doesn't mean those games cannot be fun to play, but it means they have a different purpose. They are not only made for entertaining. So we, for instance, look into simulations. Yeah, there is this so-called intersection between serious games and play. We want to offer a playful environment for a purpose, and that purpose can be behavior change, but it can also be learning, especially, and trying out things in a safe ground. When we look at these factors that make a game, then play is of course one important thing to look at, and we can say play can exist without games. So children, especially smaller children, can play around doing something without fixed rules. They just play with something. As soon as a game comes into play, basically the game adds usually rules to it, but the game needs this element of play to be a game. So that's also something we need to understand. Thus, a well-designed game would typically foster play, and that's something that we also need to keep in mind. We want to have an environment that invites the player to perform specific activities, and these, especially in the context of serious games, should be meaningful and they should be intrinsically motivating. So the player needs to be invited and the player wants to achieve something, wants to do something. And we usually, a game that I play voluntarily should be engaging so that I want to continue playing it. And that's important aspects to keep in mind when designing them. When this is done, a game can actually be very helpful to master a specific skill because it invites me to become active. I'm an active member of that game. I understand processes. I'm allowed to make mistakes. I'm in a safe environment and can continue to try out something. And especially a game can provide an environment where I can practice these skills. So I can do that over and over again. Consider a level design in a game where you have increasing complexity. Games cannot only help me to master a skill, especially digital games can also observe what I am doing. And they do that in an environment that doesn't feel like I'm observed. So a game can basically collect data about my behavior, my decisions, my actions that I took in the game, and that can give us information about how well did I understand what I have to do, how well did I perform in the game, and I can use that for learning processes, to monitor progress and to basically also see how well that works, but also I can use that for assessment. Yeah, a boss fight can be a challenge in the end in which I can understand, did you understand all the things that you have to learn? And boss fight is just one of these terms where you have the biggest monster at the end of the game. It, in a serious game context, of course, does not have to deal with monsters that you have to kind of fight. It can be the final challenge you're presented in the game. So from these non-entertainment context to serious games and gamification. A serious game is typically specifically a game that is developed for such a non-entertainment purpose. So it has a serious objective, typically learning, for instance, and it still should rely on my intrinsic motivation to achieve something within this game. Yeah? So I have an objective in the game, and I want to achieve something, and the actions that I need to perform, they should be somehow rewarding to the player so that I want to keep playing something. There are very different types of serious games around, so it can not only be education, but there are these persuasive games that are more on behavioral change. There are games for marketing purposes that try to engage me with a new product or brand. There are simulation games that are used to collect data for research purposes. So for instance, in sociology research, etc., there's a lot of different things. At the core of serious game, there is also always, we need to have a good design for the game. It needs to follow some theory of what we want to achieve. So a learning theory, a behavioral change theory, or something needs to be kind of integrated into that design. And then, of course, we need the content of the game. All of these things need to be brought together, which makes the design of serious games, of good serious games, a challenging task also that we need to look. One of the reasons for the introduction of gamification is exactly this, that designing a good serious game is costly, is expensive, is something that needs to be thoroughly done. And gamification is sometimes seen as the little sister of serious games. And it's somehow we apply game elements in non-gaming contexts. We want to use specific game elements to make otherwise boring tasks more interesting, more challenging. In practice, however, unfortunately, gamification is often done in the wrong way and is reduced to just using points, badges, leaderboards, and then we lose the motivation advantage after a very short time if we just do that. That's why we came up with a term called what is meaningful gamification. Meaningful gamification would be gamification that is thoughtfully integrated with the learning process, and it uses a composition of game elements that support the desired effects according to selected theories. And then if we do it that way, this form of gamification should be in the end beneficial to learners. Yeah, so that's something that we need to keep in mind. Also, designing gamification is not a very simple task, and I will guide you a bit in a moment also through the process of how gamification can be designed before we in the end jump to some examples. First, a bit this kind of continuum, the gamification continuum, what we see basically here on the left side would be something that is the real world. On the right side here, we see complete games. We said like games will be kind of self-sufficient. So there we design the complete game world. And in the middle part, everything here is what we call gamification. There is a distinction between what is called the structural gamification, just adding gamification mechanics to a real world problem, which could be work processes or learning processes in our context. And then content gamification would be one step further towards having more interactive elements, gamification designed for the specific learning process at hand. So structural gamification is typically what we say content agnostic, can be applied to any topic. So the same points, badges, leaderboards in the worst case can be applied to a mathematics lecture, to a French lecture, or to a vocational educational program. And content gamification would at least be one step closer to designing a serious game. Oops, wrong direction. Now, gamification has also been criticized a lot. So we say we replace, for instance, incentives, real incentives of learning achievements with fictional ones. So pointification, everyone gets a point for doing something, can lead to the situation that we're actually gaming the system rather than really focusing on the learning task. So there is rather a motivation to achieve the next batch than to really understand. And that can also lead to this so-called chocolate-covered broccoli problem that we say, yeah, something that is a badly designed learning process will not become better by just adding game elements to it. And that can also be, of course, a serious problem. Also, serious games are sometimes criticized. One point I already mentioned, it is difficult to design a good serious game, as it is already difficult to design a good game in the first place. So a bad game will never become a good serious game. If the game design is not really good, then yeah, why bother actually? And then also, synchronizing a good game with a balanced learning activity adds to that complexity. So designing a serious game is not always leading to the best result. Nevertheless, there are of course good reasons to still do it, and there are different ways of doing that. Game-based learning is not the same as serious games, because the serious game refers to the actual game at hand, while game-based learning is the process of applying games into education. And that can be done in various ways. One way is actually to develop serious games for that specific purpose. That is, of course, usually also the best way, given you have enough budget for that. But then we can also, of course, use existing games that are not originally designed for a learning purpose, but that could be repurposed. This is, of course, for example, often done in this Minecraft ecosphere. That game, as an open sandbox game, is utilized to provide certain environments and simulations and game aspects within such an environment. And the third way would be to actually apply gamification. Thus not completely jump to game-based learning, but use selected game elements in a specific purposeful manner. Why do we actually do that? So what are the good views of using games and game-based learning in our education? The core and key reason mentioned by teachers is actually that gamification or game-based learning fosters motivation. But then also we can have this kind of mixed teaching methods and mixed groups that we apply games to. So games can be accessible to various target groups, and we can have independent learning phases, training phases using games where learning can take place independently, etc. And also personalization is quite often used as a reason. So everyone has their own learning experience in a game, and collaboration can be fostered among other reasons that are mentioned. From a learning perspective, games can foster something like constructivistic learning. So students, learners gain learning experience different setups, and can make their own perspective on learning. And also we can provide this so-called safe space using a game. You are invited to also fail sometimes and learn from your failures, which is something that usually does not happen in other environments too much. However, badly designed serious games are, of course, often also using behavioristic learning approaches. So behavioristic learning is learning where you basically reward good behavior and punish bad behavior, which is a very old style of learning, and which was done at schools where actually only right answers were accepted by teachers in the very past. In schools, we moved somehow away from this behavioristic learning. Serious games shouldn't run into the same trap, and more relate to these first two points of constructivistic and exploratory learning settings. Avoid too much of behavioristic learning. So a good serious game, in essence, is a game that teaches everything it wants to teach before the player stops playing. So that would be the optimal situation. You learn what you need to learn in an engaging and interactive learning experience. Now, when we look at the process of designing gamification, we already said there are some caveats that we design too simple gamification that then doesn't work. We have thus developed a gamification design process that helps us to understand a specific problem and then tailor gamification to that need. And I will run you through these 6 steps quickly, and then we jump to some concrete examples that may be of relevance for the VR for VET situation and for vocational education and training specifically. So let's assume we want to design gamification. First of all, we need to understand, where do we apply it? What is the situation at hand? So the analysis of the application scenario helps us to understand the application context, and to understand specific aspects, requirements, the target group, and other parameters. So one example that I will go through with you with these two steps would be, we have our application scenario, an online course, and we know online courses attract many people for learning processes, and learners just learn using their web browser. In the next step, we want to understand, are we having specific problems with this approach? Our problem definition then says, what is a specific problem within this application domain? And when we are looking into gamification, for instance, are there aspects where, for instance, behavioral change could be part of the solution? In our specific context of online learning, we know, or we observe, that some learners suffer from a so-called feeling of isolation. Even though there are many people in that course, I don't really get into contact with them. I don't know where they are and if they are online or not. And if it's a large course, the number of people is also too big to really form a community or have this experience of I have co-learners. Before we now address the problem with a gamification solution, we should look into some theoretical background. What do we know? What can help if people suffer from a feeling of isolation in an online learning context? So we need to set up something like a theoretical framework where we look into existing theories related to the problem at hand. And this theoretical framework should then guide our design steps. In our example, for instance, the theory of social presence states that certain social cues, so indicating a learning community, a community of peers, can help to reduce the feeling of isolation. And that's a starting point for us. So we now think, okay, if we follow that theory, how can we design something that helps us to overcome this feeling of isolation? In the next step, then, we would say, okay, we need to identify game elements for our gamification process that helps us to match this theoretical framework. And these game elements should be based on especially those theoretical considerations of that previous step. And at the same time, keep in mind, is it feasible to develop such a feature into our online learning environment, for instance? One example could be, we could organize our large group of online learners into smaller so-called clans. That is a game element that we take from online games where many people play together and don't know each other. But as soon as we organize them into smaller groups in online gaming, they start communicating with each other. They start to take care of each other. And that's what we want to transfer into the online learning world and say, can we assign clans and give some little environments for these clans? Can they have an avatar, etc.? We then move to the design and implementation step, where we want to realize that game element. And basically all the game elements that we have selected will then come together to that solution. And here we basically bridge the selected theory, the game element, and the implementation and design phase of something. So in our example, we, for instance, then design something like this clan awareness tool. We organize people in groups of maximum 20 people. They can select a name for their clan and a logo, and everyone is represented with a little icon. And we have a bar that indicates who of the clan members is online, and for instance, who already worked on a specific task and gave an answer to this poll. So we actually have a bit of a visualization of this presence. Finally, we need to evaluate this, and we need to then see how can we explore if our solution delivers the expected result. Are we actually addressing this feeling of isolation? And we can, for instance, then take corresponding measures. And thereby we need to look back at the theory and at our selected problem and ask the question, does the implementation that we have actually address the problem in the way we expected it to do? And that is, on the one hand, of course, an important evaluation result. Are we on the right track? And we feed that into our continuous improvement cycle. So in our example, we can then, for instance, measure, did the communication behavior of people change after we introduced this notion of clans? And that way we would then know, do they actually communicate more, and do they feel less isolated in that environment? Yeah, that concludes the gamification design process. And in the last part of my presentation, I want to look at some specific examples. We will not discuss for each example the complete design process, but give a few statements on what they mean for instance, vocational education and training, and how they can come together. The first example is actually one that has been developed for the VR for VET project as a student-driven development process. It's called Boom Mic Operator, and it is a game where you basically play the role of a newbie boom mic operator. You get thrown into a situation where you need to operate a setting in a little studio. And the important part of this one is, first of all, it's a humoristic way of showing the different ways you interpret something. But also in this case, a focus is on the things that are actually not on the job profile usually. So a boom mic operator would usually only operate this boom mic that is depicted here in the center of the slide, where you work with the microphone to capture the sound while the camera does specific things. But you are thrown into a scenario where you basically have to take care about the whole scene. So you need to make sure the recording equipment is running. You need to make sure that you're in the right moment at the right place, and that some of the elements of the scene are done. So that way you're a bit aware of, usually a job profile doesn't tell always the truth. And this game then comes with some form of humor. It gives you a bit of a hectic but still fun environment and a gameplay scenario in which you experience things that can happen in a real world situation. Another example, also from a student group done during the COVID pandemic, would be rather a serious way of preparing you for required skills in a potential new job environment. In this game, they came up with the idea that you would want to become a yoga tutor that also gives remote yoga lessons. So during the pandemic, yoga was basically very difficult to give yoga lessons. So the students came up with a game in which you experience virtual yoga tutoring with support of sensor-based and camera-based tracking that allows you to indicate how can I tutor someone who is remote and whom I only see via a camera in terms of yoga community and yoga lesson giving. Another example is also rather skill-based, but here the focus was you want to provide an environment in which you train a specific skill. And this theme is virtual reality for juggling. But it was not only looking at the juggling performance per se, which you can measure in this case with virtual reality controller, that you move in a specific way to juggle virtual juggling items. But it also provides a complete environment that that gives you the impression of a virtual circus in which you, for instance, then also see what could be in my career as a circus performer, what could be the environment in which I get embedded, what are surrounding aspects of my career decision. So even for such rather exotic jobs that are probably not the main choice for most people, you could provide something with a virtual environment that gives you more of the impression of that actual job profile. Continuing on the skill setting, one of the interesting parts of serious games or immersive environments is that we can also simulate unrealistic environments that give some challenges to you, to then look into skills or competencies that are actually required in many jobs. So for instance, presentation skills are something that is really necessary, but there are very different forms of presentations that you may give depending on your job profile. So whether you're in marketing or sales, you have different pitches that you give. Whether you're in teaching and education, you rather give lecture style presentations. Whether you're in other fields, there is different forms. We didn't want to simulate all of these in this project. We then look rather into a virtual presentation environment, and the student group here has chosen alien robots as your audience, and these alien robots require you to give a presentation on how to do a very good vacation on Earth. So these alien robots want to visit Earth and have a good time there, and you present to them, you learn how to present to them and have this virtual audience of robots who can also give you this kind of very immersive feedback by having their eye movements, closing their eyes when they get tired by your presentation, or applauding when they think you did a good presentation. That way you can train relevant skills in such an environment. Also, you can prepare people for specific job profiles. So for instance, in many jobs, it is required to have a driver license. You can use applications, for instance, to prepare for the theory part of the driver license examination, and then have your driver license available when you apply for that job. And when you are already on the job, you can further improve with gamified applications, for instance, your driving skills towards safe and economic driving styles. And that can be then combined with real world data about how you are actually driving, taken from the electronics of the car, and giving you feedback on your drive style, which then helps you to become more eco-friendly in your driving world. With immersive and especially also virtual reality applications, we can also simulate environments in which you learn specific requirements of a job profile. So for instance, what is the impact in this case? What is the impact on the life of a shop assistant or sales personnel in shops during the pandemic? And how can we provide a environment in which you learn how to handle such situations when such new requirements get to you? So you learn basically also to handle unexpected requirements for your job that you can do with such an virtual environment, and follow regulations. In a similar line, also, for instance, if you're interested in jobs in public administration and you're facing situations like the pandemic or other situations where you need to organize on large scale measures in your city, serious games can provide simulating environment in which you can experience what does it mean to do specific things, how can I prepare for such situations, and that helps then to understand what are the consequences of things that I have, for instance, in specific job profiles in public administration that have to deal with such situations often. Yeah, then a bit more also some of the future perspectives of serious games cover also, yeah, can we prepare people also for upcoming changes in job profiles? What does it mean to live, for instance, in a world where robots also in day-to-day job situations where we usually wouldn't expect robots become part of our daily life? Can we learn how to cooperate, collaborate with robots? Can we learn how to behave in the presence of robots, and what does it mean to have them around us more or less all the time? So also here, serious games, virtual reality can provide insights into these kinds of expected job changes in a lot of job profiles. In this case, it's a kind of futuristic household robot, but it can be an example for various such developments. And on a larger scale, what we did at the Game Lab together with the Deutsche Museum in Nuremberg, the Deutsche Museum created a future branch, so a future museum in Nuremberg as a new museum, and we provided one exhibit where in virtual reality you can explore basically the job world of the future. So expected job profiles, how they would change within the upcoming 20, 30 years. What do we foresee there? And in that future museum, you can explore some of these expected foreseen changes in a virtual reality show. Yeah. With that, I would conclude my presentation